So, good afternoon. Hope everybody had a great lunch and an opportunity to enjoy this beautiful day outside. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the CIA's Associate Deputy Director for Digital Innovation, Sean Roche. Sean Roche's 34-year career, hard to believe, has been spent advancing technological solutions to intelligence challenges. Just stop and think for a moment about what that really means, how much technology has changed over his course since 1981. To have been on the leading edge of that change over this period of rapid innovation must have been quite a ride. In March, because of his depth of experience and expertise, he was tapped to help lead the first new CIA Directorate in 50 years, the Directorate for Digital Innovation. The new Directorate's mission is to accelerate the next generation of digital solutions for the agency. I had the privilege to get to talk and get to know Sean a bit better over the course of yesterday and today, and I can tell you that he is indeed passionate about that mission. He is also passionate about fueling and nurturing the next generation to prepare for the threats that are yet to come. Please join me in welcoming Sean Roche.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Okay, the after lunch spot. That's a tough one. Right, do it to the CIA guy, okay, because we don't have enough against us already. Don't worry, it's after lunch, but it's Georgia. They're really usually a light fare, So I've been listening to everything that's been said today. The remarks have been fantastic, and they've basically eviscerated a lot of my prepared remarks. I was crossing out what's already been mentioned, so I wouldn't do it again. Let's get a lot of questions. How often do you get to ask the CIA a question? Right? No, not that we're going to answer it. But and I've only been a public acknowledged official since October 1st, when this new directorate was officially launched, our IPO moment, I guess. And so I'll have to figure out how the stock price is doing when we do our annual with Congress. But I really want to thank Senator Chambliss and Representative Westmoreland for inviting CIA to speak. And I'm making a commitment to make sure that we continue to support this event and the partnerships down here. So I just want to say it's good to be back in Georgia. I haven't been here in a very, very long time. It was actually, I was a senior in high school. I took the bus down from New York to interview at Georgia Tech. And you came down on a Friday night, they put you up in the dorms, and Saturday you did the tour, and then you talked to the admissions people. Well, I came down Friday night and experienced some Southern hospitality. Bottom line, I ended up at Waffle House at 2 a.m., a little tipsy. And so the next day, I really don't think I was on my game. And the whole time, they were smiling while they're talking to me, so I'm just going to say, hey, I'm killing them here, right? They couldn't understand me. Between the Brooklyn accent and not feeling very well, it was like, anyway, I'm thinking Georgia Tech would be a great place for me and do some engineering. And they're just kind of smiling the whole time. And so at the end, I said, right to them, I go, hey, so I got to ask a question, how'd I do? Do all right? Just going to go? And they're kind of just looking at me, well, we'll get back to you. And I said, look, I'm maybe not on top of my game. I said, last night, I got to be honest with you, at 2 a.m., I ended up at Waffle House. I'm kind of a little tired. The guy looked at me and said, son, your age, college, Friday night, there's no way you don't end up at Waffle House at 2 a.m. And Waffle House, as you probably know, was founded by a Georgia Tech grad, so they were pretty happy about that. I'm also glad to be in the same state that created and continues to create the world's greatest airframe, the C-130. C-130 Hercules is in my opinion, the most efficient, high-utilization airplane ever built. And we could talk about the analogies of history of American aviation, how that compares to cyber. We could talk about healthcare and cyber, but those probably talks for another time. We have launched this new directorate. We're doing this modernization, which was a bold, honest assessment that we needed to change at CIA. This new organization combines a couple different elements. It is the 5th director. We haven't done that, as been mentioned, in 50 years. So it has all the cyber operations and threat is in that organization. All of the open source intelligence it's gathered, that would be social media, et cetera. All of the data management, data exploitation, data science is in there, and all of the CIO functions in IT in one organization. They were all previously in separate organizations. In a lot of cases, very independent organizations. So a lot of cultures and a lot of change. So let's talk a little bit about the cyber landscape as we see it. And I'd like to bridge some of the conversations happened earlier by discussing some of the specific things we need to do as we architect new systems, which we'll start with educating our folks to do it in a very different way. Okay, so the cyber threat is, of course, increasing pretty dramatically. There's 4 really key trends that we look at that drive how we describe the cyber threat. So the range of actors, as you've heard today, is increasing. But a couple things in there. Distinguishing between a state actor and a non-state actor within a country is increasingly difficult to do. So if you're in the cyber business, the word attribution should be something that you're always working on, and that attribution piece has gotten a lot tougher. We also see very, very aggressive and effective organizational learning models within these disparate groups and between these groups. And that's a newer behavior. They are learning and adapting very, very quickly. We need to at least be at parity with them. It's been mentioned today about them being asymmetric. One asymmetric aspect is they don't have the bureaucracies we have. They don't have the restrictions and the camps we have and some of the policies and laws we have, and they share very, very quickly of what's working and what's not working. So despite being very, very diverse, these set of attackers appear to have a common culture of collaboration at a tempo that's very fast. So China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are the vast majority of the malicious actor that can be attributed to a state actor, but tangentially, increasingly, terrorist groups will experiment with hacking, and we're seeing terrorist sympathizers also conducting low-level cyber incidents on behalf of a terrorist group and to attract attention. And then there's the malicious attacks that are just plain annoying from people who apparently spend most of their time playing World of Warcraft and don't have a lot else to do. But they take a lot of our time, and it was mentioned earlier by the general. I thought it was an exceptionally good point. That defensive piece is very, very expensive. The second aspect of the variety of attacks, what they're actually going after, we are seeing more politically motivated cyber attacks are now a growing reality, and foreign actors have the ability to reconnoiter and develop access to U.S. critical infrastructure systems, which might be quickly exploited and disrupted if their intent becomes hostile. It's been mentioned several times today, but we need to be worried about that. And some of the technology trends are not working in our favor for that particular set of targets. Third is the lag time between intrusion and detection. This is getting worse. So our posture to detect and anticipate, and that's a key word, we're going to talk about architecting for anticipation, and more importantly, to respond to incidents falls far short of where it needs to be. Verizon had an incident several years ago in 2013. They did a 10-year review of their incidents, and they found that while the hacker success grew from 75 to 95%, but the responders' success in detecting only went from 13% to 20% in the same time frame. So we're falling farther behind on there. Fourth is the lag time to restore protection and or capture evidence. And you heard I mentioned attribution, and we talked today about sources and methods. That's the intelligence methods that we use to understand what's happening. But also there's the legal side of it, of attribution, which is getting evidence that allows us to pursue further action. So the basic paradigm for networks and systems is to maintain integrity and continue to operate and overcome failures. That's the way we design things. I'm an engineer. As engineers, that's what we do. This creates a liability for us. And when we try and respond to cyber attacks, because of the way our networks are designed to stay alive, we've also, it actually hurts us. It creates liability for us. We've also built, and you've seen this already, and as we stand up fully, the cyber commands, we need to question how many human layers of human intervention we've built into these system decisions to take action. It's all too slow, and it's doomed to failure as a system today because the decision authority is also too highly dispersed. At this point, I think it's the very real failure of humans in the loop. I think of the very real failure of humans in the loop at 3 Mile Island plant, which happened, I'm looking at this audience, a lot of people, it was way before, so showing my age. Although it represented a control system that was orders of magnitude less complex than our IT systems, networks today. It asked the operators to make too many decisions with inadequate information, resulting in delays that could have had nearly catastrophic results. So despite sincere and very expensive efforts to improve network defenses, the range of attack access available through remote hacking intrusion, supply chain operations, the insertion of compromised hardware or software, the presence of malicious insiders, and mistakes by system users, which was mentioned earlier today. It's number one problem. Mistakes by do not set the password to password. We'll have these risks in our systems for years to come. The cyber threat won't be eliminated, but rather it's going to have to be risk managed. We're going to have to do it in a very different way. So let's talk about, now that we've got all the depressing stuff, let's talk about what a new design paradigm is. And no surprise, it starts with the way we educate our system designers. Underpinning the solutions to these challenges is a fundamental change in the way we teach technical problem solving for engineers, for scientists, and for those who manage them. Classic design process or even system engineering starts with a review of requirements and ends up with a verification of system performance. We call that the V, with development, fabrication, and testing in between. This process was conceived at the dawn of the modern industrial age has served us well, but in the digital age, we'll need a new model for system development and design that is based on different assumptions. So consider that for a minute. How successful we've been in a country of building amazing things that work really well under really harsh conditions, and just hearing that that whole system of doing that, building it and verifying it, does not work for where we need to be going forward. So it may appear to be counterintuitive, but much of the solution forward rests in abandoning our innate human desire to address risk by increasing our level of control. Addressing these challenges of cybersecurity is an illustrative example of how our design paradigm needs to change. So first, we need to understand that best practices will evolve in real time. Sharing information regarding cyber threats must become a rigorous, systematic, and real-time practice that actually feeds the development process and forms the basis of what we call requirements. The requirements process, the way we do it today, we go out and survey people and find out, trying to understand what they need. It evolves over time. We often put too much into it. That process doesn't work. It's not working now. It's not working for major, large systems now. It's taking too long in cyber. What we talked about sharing earlier, it has to go farther than that. It's not just a sharing to respond. That sharing has to feed into requirements immediately. Simply put, we design for the future, solving yesterday's problem when it comes to networks and network design, network architectures. In the world where government procurement, in the world of government procurement, the notion of real-time floating technical requirements is heresy. Our educational system must teach this design approach starting at the primary school level. The way we teach in a serial manner to solve a problem is not going to get us there. Second, we must develop the tiered cyber defense posture that allocates appropriate resources based on potential tactical and long-term impact from the wide variety of cyber actors and wide variety of cyber attacks, incidents, and actors. To use a common analogy, we appear to be the kids chasing the soccer ball for all of these events without careful consideration of their magnitude or potential harm. You've seen huge numbers like 1 million attacks a day. Well, the problem is not all those attacks are equal. The way we go about allocating resources to those attacks does not look like we have a good system for setting priorities. There's no debate about the fact that we lack a sufficient number of experienced or skilled cyber threat experts, so there has to be a greater emphasis on using that cadre wisely. And today I'd offer that we're not doing everything we can. The one-size-fits-all approach, which often relies on applying a rather formulaic serial procedures, lacks the required agility and efficiency. If I keep coming back to the theme of speed, that's what it's all about. This new directorate, the one charge I have is there's plenty of innovation, there are plenty of answers, nothing goes at the speed of mission when it comes to digital. Our procurement, what you're hearing is our procurement system doesn't respond. Writing RFPs when we need something is even IDIQs, if you're familiar with some of the contract lingo, it's not going to work. It's more than simply inefficient and wasteful. The system we have today is basically perpetuating legacy practices that don't match up. So Third, we need, during the information system design process, we need to bake in both the instrumentation for monitoring across the system as well as the accompanying analytics. There's no way a human can do this anymore. The networks are too complex. The New York City outage, not New York City, sorry. The New York Stock Exchange outage, where it froze. Here was the issue. That system is so complex, nobody can describe it or really understand it. We can't map systems today because there's huge, huge systems of systems. So that's one of the problems with being more and more interconnected, which we are. It's an interconnected world. That's not going to stop. So trying to do that with humans in the loop and trying to do that the traditional way is not going to work. Having these systems wired for reporting and monitoring and then having big data analytics behind that is the only way we're even going to try and keep pace with it. Both of these must operate in real time with automated mechanisms to detect cyber attacks and intrusions and mitigate them at machine speed. Today's approach is based on, also a lot of our defense is based on stop them as they come at us. That's our design philosophy for a lot of the legacy, what we call cast iron, mainframe, and server farm models that has security applied like a sarcophagus over this disparate network. That won't work. So there's two types of vulnerability tools that you're very familiar with today. The first are intended to detect vulnerabilities in the applications so their possible exploitation can be minimized. The other set of tools are firewalls that attempt to detect and prevent attacks and breaches. Neither of these provide adequate protection. They're difficult to use, and they usually have a performance hit on our systems. We know that some of these tools have been disabled on some systems because senior officials complained that their email was slow to load or their system was slow to respond. So user performance will cause us to, and user demands to get the mission done will cause us to override things that impede the mission. So security instrumentation is simultaneously simpler and more powerful than the array of disconnected approaches we use today. The time has come to stop scanning, stop firewalling, and stop attempts to do security work at the perimeter. Instead, we can add security analysis and protection directly to applications, running them accurately and efficiently wherever they are. Security instrumentation is a revolutionary way to augment mountains of insecure code with strong security defenses so that these applications earn the trust that government agencies have already placed in them. The vetting of these applications with millions and millions of lines of legacy code with other code heaped on top of it and trying to do that in a secure environment is not worth the time. This represents a dramatic departure from today's situational awareness and monitoring center approach. It relies on red, yellow, green dashboards and then a human response, which is usually call the boss. Consider that in most cases, the person in the monitoring center is not empowered to take action and is instead a carbon-based reporting translation mechanism. And typically, the approach is to call in other people, first the experts, then the decision makers. The human response spends far too much time diagnosing before reaching the conclusion that an attack has occurred. In today's design paradigm, this level of instrumentation and monitoring required would be seen as intrusive and subverting, interfering with the primary objective of delivering information services. There are people who just said, wait a minute, this is not the way we design, and you're putting the emphasis on a totally different group. We design beautiful systems. I say, yes, and now you're covering them all up. And the analogy here for the air power discussion some other time is design the world's best fighter and then try to make it stealth. And you basically do everything bad to that airframe you ever could do. And we have to have that match. It just so happens that part of the F-35 is built in Marietta as well. So tools that deliver this level of diligence demand integrated, coordinated, and finely tuned capabilities using commonly understood concepts and terminology to accurately distinguish ordinary from anomalous, selectively increase scrutiny where warranted, actively test newly observed behavior, and there's merely a novel manifestation of normal operations, and automatically, without human intervention, modify network settings to safely thwart malicious objectives without undermining operational missions. So I have discussed this a lot with a lot of people, and somebody says, well, it sounds like you're building something from the Terminator where, you want a system to become self-aware. No, but the fact is that designed from the base in, we're going to have something that is much more akin to what we do with satellites, which is we know that human intervention is the most dangerous thing to a satellite anomaly. So we have taken these systems, put them on basically Maslow's basic needs of operation, and put them into safe mode so the humans can figure out what to do. The human fast response on satellite usually goes quite badly. And so if you think about it, we have design concepts for systems we can't get to that make automated decisions and protect themselves. We are not there on networks today. This is where we need to be in terms of design. We have to approach the design process with the assumptions that the attacks will happen, that they will penetrate the layered defenses we've created, and that we must therefore trap and contain them and limit the damage through a design architecture that can segregate the system vertically and horizontally. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we are enabling this and what we're doing at CIA. Several years ago, we began to implement a pretty radical shift away from the way we did our internal networks. And previously, we'd followed what I'd characterize as the typical government procurement model, setting requirements, hiring a large defense company, of which there are only 5 left, and literally thousands of contractors to build, adapt, operate, rebuild, patch, fix, and configure our IT systems. The model worked well in the era where the data we got was relatively predictable and also fitfully small. In the past few years, the explosion of digital signatures has demonstrated the need to accommodate an ever-growing tsunami of data with both a computational element that could not only accommodate this wide range of structured and unstructured data, but also quickly enable our analysts and advanced methodologists and data scientists to use the latest commercial applications. There's no way we could use the traditional approach to keep pace with what CIA needs to do. So, under guidance of one of CIA's truly visionary innovators, an officer I've worked with for years, who I refer to as the Elon Musk of the CIA, a guy named Doug Wolf, we came to view the functions of the computational element, the hardware element, is just a commodity service. This meant adopting a cloud-based architecture, and we floated a request for proposals and shocked the world when we chose Amazon to provide CIA's secure cloud computing capability. Just so everybody understands, our CIA data is not out next to grandma's Zappos shoe order somewhere on the Amazon network. Okay, we hired Amazon to come in and provide the capability they provide in a CIA enclave in a cluster cloud architecture. The officer who implemented this vision, our Chief Information Officer, Doug Wolf, was named Federal Computing's 2014 Man of the Year. We did not make the shift to cloud computing to be fashionable or simply to do something different. It was done out of mission necessity, mainly for speed of mission, but also allows an increasing number of our staff to focus on the intelligence issues and building the applications that ride on that hardware stack. And that's where we need to be focused. Too often we are rebuying both parts of the stack. And too often it's proprietary, and too often it's linked to a specific vendor. We're tired of buying boats for people. So we need to decouple that, and we need to focus on the applications, because that's where the knowledge of the people who need the applications, that's the unique piece for us, what that analyst needs to perform, what they need to do. And frequently, we need to give them access to actually be able to write those apps and put them on the network. And today, that is a rather arduous process that takes too long. This effort was not, to do the cloud, was not without challenges or controversy. The decision was actually challenged in court more than once, and eventually another potential supplier lost their protest in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. It also represents something of a culture clash within CIA. The valuations of cloud security will need to earn their way into our risk management tradecraft. And given that this is a very radically different way of doing IT, we need to make sure that we have mechanisms to measure that risk. And we don't use the checklist we used for the cast iron server model. Simply put, we have a checklist for network security and for hosting an application that would be akin to tuning a 1958 Chevy. We're driving a Tesla now. The two don't match up. If you read the Consumer Report on Tesla, it got 103 out of 100. How do you get 103 out of 100? It means the criteria that Consumer Reports use isn't right for Tesla. So as intelligence officers, we're constantly looking to answer questions that uniquely can only be answered through the application of tradecraft. Everything we're going to do in the digital domain is intended to enhance our ability to do that at the speed of mission. So if you noted in the press, perhaps, a couple weeks ago, Director John Brennan announced the release of more than 19,000 pages of presidential daily briefings given to Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. And you look through those, they're online, if you look through those, you see that in most cases we had very, very small shards of data from which we almost sound like pundits in our analysis trying to say what the Soviets might do. And for some, the Soviets are the Russians. So the Soviets might do or what might happen. Today, we've got the exact opposite problem. Instead of seeking to understand succession and internal power struggles based on photographs taken at parades, we are inundated with data regarding thousands of individuals who are key influencers for various critical issues. Our analysts are challenged even further by the emergence of proliferation of non-state actors who have access to ubiquitous communication streams and tools and post their information online. And that's why the Open Source Center was put in this new organization, because that's also a stream of data that has its own challenges as well. So we've put a huge emphasis on a couple things in the agency. All of the solutions are based around talent. We're aggressively going out and hiring data scientists, and not people who call themselves data scientists. We're very kind of picky about it. Hiring data scientists. And I'm often asked how we can attract, recruit, and retain a cadre of both cyber experts and data scientists, who some are data scientists for cyber because they're looking at all of that analytical work that's running from our very wired and monitored system. So I've wondered myself, after spending time with some of our data scientists, and I traveled here with one of them, Jason, who's a native from Georgia, and I wanted to make sure I had a native speaker in case I ran into any issues. So I can tell you a few things about what we're doing, and we're having success in this area. First of all, these people are driven by tough, demanding challenges, and we have no shortage of them. The way to really throw down with a data scientist or a cyber person is say, I don't think anybody can do this. And then just hand it to them, and then they disappear. There's Coke cans and pizza boxes, and they come back with a solution. So one thing is we have to keep feeding them huge challenges, which, by the way, means that when they walk in the door, we don't tell them that it's going to take them 5 years to get to the level where we invite them to the really secret meeting and give them the big challenge. I'll give you an example of where we did that. Next, they want to work a variety of problems and get exposure to the widest range of problems. Again, CIA, we have no shortage of a wide range of problems, and they're always changing. Finally, these folks are self-actualized when they know they're having an impact for both mission and their tradecraft. They want to know they're getting better at what they do. They want to compare with their colleagues. They want to be able to have creds for where they are in their Python coding, et cetera. So we have to let them say something about what they do. And we bring people in, we take away their phone, we take away their Rolodex, we take away their computer, and we try and erase their life. These folks are the most digital people we have. We can't operate that way, and that's one reason, separate discussion, we're wiring up CIA for secure wireless. Finally, let me just tell you this story. Let me also say, for the data scientists, we've integrated them into our hard target centers and our counterterrorism operations into it. And again, none of this 5 years before you get smart, throw them into it. And yeah, there'll be some issues. Some of our data scientists are a bit eclectic, but it's paid off. So last summer, we were faced with an extremely unique challenge, and one that was really critical to the country and to the safety of specific Americans overseas. A data scientist spent the weekend developing, we tried to solve it a million different ways. We couldn't do it. I ended up handing it off to a data scientist, spent the weekend developing a unique correlation tool, wrote it himself, did it on a laptop because our system couldn't handle it, that revealed critical vulnerabilities regarding an aggregation of some data. It would never have been obvious. Then he proved the case convincingly. This was fixing this problem was personally tasked out by the director. The result of this work was presented to the president's senior staff at the White House. And while providing feedback, one of the seniors said, "Gee, is that young fellow even old enough to buy beer?" making a joke. We all kind of laughed. It was only later that my team told me that he's actually 19 and he was a college intern. We don't give our college interns different badges, so I had no idea. So it's a great illustration of now this young man is a double major, pre-med, in computer science, and he's 19 and he's a junior because he skipped some grades or something. He's about this big. And my number one question is, can we get him back? What do we need to do to get him back? And they said, well, you just did. You opened up and gave him that challenge. I just want to close with one thing, because all you may remember from all this rattling is just that the guy went to Waffle House and went, when he was interviewing for Georgia Tech. By the way, I didn't get in. I did not get into Georgia Tech. Rejected. So I want you to remember this. Be incredibly optimistic. For all that we said about the things we need to face, be incredibly optimistic. I am. Because the workforce that has entered into these ranks, both contractor and government, since 9/11 is the most capable workforce in the world. Naturally collaborative, naturally inquisitive. I don't care what you hear. I don't care what labels people try and put on them. These people are absolutely amazing. I know that World War II, we know that was America's greatest generation. I believe this is the next greatest generation. So people like myself with 34 years of experience need to step aside, fix up things as much as we can, get it stable, and then punch out. Go to Florida, do whatever people do, move to Augusta, I guess, okay? But step aside, because these people are going to take over, and they need to take over, and they're going to take us farther than we ever were, okay? Or farther than we could take these agencies. That's going to be my job from now on. Get ready to get out and step aside. Have tremendous confidence and tremendous faith, and sleep well. I know we talked about a lot of challenges today. We're nailing them. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director Roche. We'll take questions now. We'll get the conversation going with a couple of questions that are really based on some of your last comments. How do we find out more about internship opportunities for our students?
Okay, so go to our website. We have a CIA.gov website where you can learn about you can actually click on internships. We hire interns with all majors, everything from, I had at one point, I had a PhD in a technical unit, a PhD in anthropology, and a person with a bachelor's in zoology. Knocking it out of the park. So all disciplines, all backgrounds, because we have a very diverse mission. Also, diversity is absolutely a mission essential element at CIA, not a nice to have or something we just thought about. Diversity in language, diversity in background, we cannot operate without it. So if you bring those skills as well, you are highly desired.
And the next question speaks to that just a bit more. Clearly, diversity is highly valued. We want a variety of skill sets, but as a university like GRU begins to weave cybersecurity throughout its programs, are there any particular backgrounds that may be more attractive, like linguistics or business? Or?
So it's really kind of amazing. Stephanie addressed this morning, in the medical field, if you look at the amount of data, let's take an example, medical. So you have electronic health records, EHRs. So if, as a project, you did work to create cloud security applications using the NIST standards for electronic health records, that kind of background, that's applying a science, a big data problem, and a security issue. And that's something that would fit very well with the kinds of things that the School of Medicine would be interested in doing, and we would be interested on a ton of fronts on that. So more and more, since cracking the genome, a lot of what you do here is going to be big data and big data problems. Like, for instance, studying patterns, disease patterns, and from a genetic basis, that amount of data and drawing correlations off of it, and taking classes that allow you to solve those kind of problems. Because what we're looking for is, again, not any particular degree, not any particular class, but it's, have you demonstrated problem solving, complex problem solving, where you took a very different approach, even if you fail in that approach. And some of the people we've interviewed came in and talked about this great project they did and how they failed. And it wasn't the right answer. It was the wrong approach. Now, we didn't know what they were talking about, by the way, so they could have told us it was the right approach and it worked. But what they did was talk about how they structured a problem, how they went out and got data that wasn't apparently there, and found correlations that would never be obvious. So it's that type of critical problem solving.
Excellent. Without discussing sensitive information, how is cyber warfare being used to fight ISIL, and will it be used for other potential adversaries? How will it be used for other potential adversaries?
Well, you notice the blacked out pages. So ISIL has a very deliberate, over a year ago, ISIL began executing a very highly strategic social media campaign using a pretty diverse array of platforms and thousands of online supporters around the globe. We've watched the group rapidly gain expertise in the platforms it uses and often leverages multiple tools within each platform. So it's a problem that needs to be very carefully studied, and if we're going to respond to it quickly, then it has to be a very high degree of shared knowledge across all these entities you've heard from today. And I also want to echo what you've heard about cooperation and working between entities. I know Washington can be a difficult place. I have never seen such a level of cooperation. It's just, the mission is ringing so loudly. And ISIL is a horrific, terrible enemy that needs to be destroyed. And so every capability that we have needs to be brought to bear, and it's not going to be one thing. It's not going to be any one conventional or asymmetric thing. So certainly studying and understanding that problem, and then taking some of the things we normally would use for other purpose in the cyber world and aggressively applying them.
Excellent. And the last question is, with OPM in mind, what steps are the government taking to improve the defense of network infrastructures? Well,
it's a great question, because who ever heard of OPM before this, by the way, if you weren't in the government, right? Now this is like a household word. You got NPR. Every day there's a story about computer intrusions, cyber intrusions, differentiating attack from intrusion. It's a great question, because it rings home the fact that this has opened up a national dialogue. And while I'm not going to say anything specific as to response or OPM, it reminds us that the whole issue of cybersecurity and awareness of what we need to do permeates everything and permeates every aspect of our lives. And Stephanie this morning rattled off, if you took down those 4, if we really dug into it for people in this room, I guarantee that we'd find a lot of folks that didn't do those, quote, 4 simple things to increase their personal cybersecurity. And so, we've had to remind our young sailors and soldiers and airmen that, it's great that you've got all the social media, and it's great that it's available all the time with ubiquitous bandwidth, but sometimes aggregating that can be a pretty dangerous thing. So that training needs to happen the first week of basic training and not the second or third deployment. And that training needs to happen, as we talked today, at grade school levels. So, again, an education issue.
Excellent. Deputy Director Roche, thank you for a fascinating discussion on the role that the CIA continues to play in cybersecurity. Let's give him a hand.